For my final assessment, I'm going to talk about information literacy, specifically relating to some teaching given in Semester 1, and I'm going to try and focus on learning outcomes and how Bloom's taxonomy can work as a tool for me to move forward. I've been a librarian for over 20 years now, working in a variety of fields including medical research, the NHS, further education and now HE. I currently am the academic liaison librarian for 5 different subject areas at Brookes University, and one of my roles is to instruct students in using library services, from basic how to reserve a book to using specialist software or interrogating specific subject databases to retrieve journal articles. One of the differences from regular academic teaching, if there is such a thing, is that I may only see students once in their academic lifetime. And one of the challenges of the job is to engage and make your mark in what may be a very short space of time. So why information literacy? And I'm going to commit the cardinal sin of reading from the PowerPoint, but it is key and it shows the centrality of my specialty to Oxford Brookes University. So digital information literacy is to be able to use appropriate technology to search for high quality information, critically to evaluate and engage with the information obtained. And that's from 2015, so very recent. Why do students need to be information literate? I hadn't actually come across IAKT syndrome before, but actually I had, because all librarians know this, but it's the first time I'd ever seen it actually given an acronym. We did tend to have an inkling about what Gross and Rea attest as well, that students consistently overestimate their information literacy skills. When they're tested, they're actually slightly below par, and I would say the so-called Google generation are not what they're cracked up to be. This is from the mouths of a couple of our students in a recent library satisfaction survey, where we asked them to suggest improvements to the library. Search tools can't be specific enough. Sure, the system is easy, but you have to learn it first, not straightforward, so they are struggling to a certain extent. And this shows that from the official Oxford Brookes University line on information literacy to the requests of our students, it's very clear that information literacy is a required central element to study. So hence my running the teaching session that I'm going to talk about. The academic in this case was very keen for the students to have multiple library sessions and was happy to sign them over to me for 2 one-hour slots, and that's quite unusual, because often a very understandable issue for academics is giving time to the library for such teaching when time is such a valuable commodity to them. I should say that none of my teaching is compulsory or assessed, but although she wasn't present, she did ask me to take a register just to give the impression that it was a little bit more compulsory, if you can be a little bit compulsory. So I used a mixture of methods, starting off with a PowerPoint which I talked over, where I explained the outcomes and talked about what I was going to be doing with them, but I also used something new, which was a paper exercise. I split them into groups and gave them an extract from a journal article from which I had omitted some important information. So they had to see where they believed things should be cited. They had to look at the reference list and distinguish between the different types of references contained in that reference list, and they needed to spot what was missing from the key bibliographic information. Then there was a demonstration of a piece of software called EndNote, which is reference management software, and then I stepped them through setting up their own EndNote library. So they would be on the computers and I was on the main screen showing them exactly what to do, and they were following me step by step. I always start with a list of outcomes, and this is those for that session. Looking back at it, I can see now that I use a lot of understand, which now sounds a bit wishy-washy and of course is potentially unmeasurable. I always have my own outcomes, which are unprofessed but key to the job. Because I just don't know if or when I'll see them again, I need to take the opportunity to frankly be as nice and approachable as possible and convince them that I'm the most helpful person on the planet and the person that they need to turn to if they have any issues with the library. So the best way of doing this, aside of providing cake, is by making it as relevant as possible. With this session, the lecturer had given me the lowdown on the assignment with dates and subject matter, so I felt fully briefed. They needed to get to grips with referencing, find some journal articles to use in their assignment, and then load them into EndNote, which was perfect. And the teaching is also likely to be more memorable if it's done in an entertaining, engaging way with the students at the centre, which is one of the reasons why I use the paper exercise. Now, I had heard of Bloom's taxonomy before starting this course, but I'd never investigated the theory or thought how it might apply to my teaching. So after reading about it in Butcher, excuse me, I felt it could be applied to the stages of information literacy as I see them. A kind of ideal scenario for information literacy teaching, where you would aim to reach the pinnacle of the pyramid, which would be the evaluation stage. So it would start off with the knowledge, which would perhaps be the assignment. Comprehension was picking out keywords. Application was starting to create a search strategy. Analysis, finding some useful articles. Synthesis was extracting information to write their own assignment, and then the evaluation, being able to critically evaluate the extracted information and really get to grips with it. And there's the pyramid I talked about. So I've tried to see where the points of Bloom's taxonomy fit with my original outcomes and the methods that I employed in the teaching of this session. I would say that the ability to recognise references and bibliographies is really basic knowledge, but then it moves on a little bit to understanding the importance of citing and avoiding plagiarism, which would be comprehension, and using reference management software can be seen as application, that is, using a tool to classify information. So that was the outcomes. The methods that I used, I felt stepped it up a little bit, moving a little bit more towards the pinnacle of the taxonomy. So the brief exercise was analysis. EndNote software, we're back to knowledge and comprehension. Actually putting things into EndNote I felt was quite clearly application, but putting useful articles into EndNote, not just bunging anything in there, was analysis. They were looking at what the article said and analysing whether they were actually useful. So what I hadn't done, what I haven't reached, is the two top levels, which is synthesis and evaluation. And I felt that those would probably come after my contact with the students in this particular teaching had finished, if it came at all. It would be the sort of next stage on from the particular session. So really I need to look at those two top levels, but how does one proceed with this? Well, I'm quite lucky because I am actually seeing these students again. There will actually be an opportunity this semester to see them again. So I could perhaps try and think of an exercise that would allow them to demonstrate their understanding of the teaching received previously. Ask them if they're still using EndNote. That's quite a basic thing. So yeah, maybe another exercise. I did feel that exercise went well, so hopefully there would be ways to follow up, and obviously asking for feedback is one, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about feedback in a moment. So some more general reflections. Because I'm part of a small team at the satellite Oxford Brookes University campus at Harcourt Hill, there is a tendency to informally reflect on teaching just by chatting to one's colleagues in the office, and there was no exception in this particular case, and I was very pleased with the breakout exercise and talked quite a great deal about that. And in fact I shared the exercise with a colleague at the main campus who was looking for something similar to use with her teaching. I had put a version of the PowerPoint onto the Moodle module, but I was very disappointed when I looked the other day and saw it only had one view. But I hadn't publicised it, so I think I need to concentrate a little more on the promotion of such things. So if I do slideshows, make videos, create handouts for them, there's no point in just putting them on Moodle and hoping that the students look at them. I need to promote them. I think I need to reiterate things a bit more. My colleague Hazel Rotherer recently published a paper as the result of her Teaching and Learning Fellowship project, which drew some interesting conclusions about reinforcing messages about information literacy, little and often being the overall conclusion. So I will try and do some work on that as well, and focus on feedback. It's notoriously difficult to get usable feedback from library sessions. I have handed out forms before and they tend to be overwhelmingly positive, which is very nice, but it's not actually very useful. I don't know whether this might be to do with not really having the time to build up a relationship with the group, or because of the way librarians are viewed, I don't know, kind but dull experts, so let's humour them and say they're really nice. It just is very difficult to get feedback. We do get informal feedback through a number of channels, as well as more formally through various surveys. Some of which are useful, as in the library satisfaction survey, which I mentioned earlier. Others are vague in the extreme, thinking of the NSS, which scores the library, but student comments are few to actually explain the score that they've given. But I need to solicit more specific feedback, there's no question of that, so I intend to try perhaps a limited number of open questions, as suggested by Hazel Rotherer. I'm also keen on the slightly nerve-wracking idea of having a colleague sit in on my training, preferably someone from a different campus or a totally different subject, to get an entirely new perspective. So my recommendations to myself for improving my teaching would be to seek better channels for feedback, employ more drop-in sessions, so turning up at the point of need rather than necessarily at the beginning of the course when they've got so many other things to tune into, actually turning up a few weeks perhaps before an assignment deadline is due. Creating more online tools for use as and when. This is another way of dropping in and making the material ready for at the point of need. I have made some progress with that already. I've created a couple of videos for communication, media and culture undergraduates. And I want to increase my use of mixed methods in sessions. I was very pleased with the way the paper exercise went. I feel the students were slightly more engaged in that, and it made a good breakthrough session as well. So I want to increase using that sort of method. And that's it. Thanks very much for listening, and there are my references.